Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll talk a lot about the Saints draft. We'll talk about the New Orleans Saints. We'll touch on the Kentucky Derby and what may be in store for the Louisiana horses. Great panel for you tonight. Katherine Terrell of NOLA.com. She covers horse racing and the Saints for NOLA.com. And Mike Triplett of ESPN. Guys, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming down tonight. I certainly appreciate it. Katherine, we always like to start off talking a little bit about what you guys are involved in. Tell us a little about NOLA.com. And of course, you just got back from, is it Louisville?
Yes, I was in Louisville for the entire week covering the Derby. So I think Saints fans are happy that I'm back to the Saints beat this week. But we got a lot of stuff coming up. Obviously, we have rookie minicamp this weekend, and we'll have media access from that, or at least we'll talk to Sean Payton. So it's going to start cranking up. We got a lot of good things coming out. And before we know it, it'll be football season again, I guess.
No doubt.
Football season again, or still?
Still.
Or what's the right word?
Is there an off season?
You never have an off season, right? Because you're writing 365 for ESPN, basically with Saints coverage.
Right.
Tell us a bit
well,
about
although I was a horse racing writer like Katherine,
about a
I had to text her a few times now. How do I get in touch with? What if I want to go? Because the Kentucky Derby was the Saints beat for a week. But yeah, exactly. Rookie minicamp will be this weekend, and then OTAs start at the end of the month. So we'll actually get to see these guys on the field before a break. But yeah, I'm going to do a deeper dive into their draft picks. Started that this week. Talked to Urban Meyer about a couple of the Ohio State guys, and then a couple more features coming on those guys, and then we get into actual where these guys lining up on the field and position battles and all that good stuff.
Well, I tell you, that's what a lot of fans are looking forward to as well. We normally start with Saints. We're going to start a little bit with the Kentucky Derby since Katherine's here. Katherine, first of all, your impressions of Louisville. Again, I kind of followed you on Twitter and Facebook, so I know that you really enjoyed being there.
I did tweet about it a lot.
Yeah, you did. So tell us a little bit about your experience.
Well, it was my first Derby, and it was just great. Anyone that knows me knows that I've been a lifelong horse racing fan, and I've covered it for a long time. And it was basically everything I expected. It's really interesting just to be immersed in that. You're with all these people that absolutely live and breathe horses, and it definitely calls for some early mornings. You have to get up about 5:30 in the morning to go interview everyone. But you know, it's the best of the best, and the coolest part about it is the walkover. You get access like you never get in the NFL. You get to, before the race, you go to the barn and then you walk over on the track in front of the grandstand with the horse and all its connections, and you look up and there's 160,000 people yelling for all these horses, and it's really, really unique, and there's nothing like it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Mo Tom, Tom's Ready, their role into the Derby, and then maybe if you think that those horses may end up in either the Preakness or the Belmont or both.
Well, they were both always going to be long shots. Obviously, the favorite going into that race was Nyquist. I think that even though there was a lot of detractors, he was always going to be hard to beat. So you knew that going in. I think Mo Tom is the better horse than Tom's Ready, and Mo Tom placed 8th, Tom's Ready placed 12th. I think that 8th is definitely respectable considering the quality of the horses in there. So I think that they'll both skip the Preakness, and Mo Tom will probably point towards the Belmont, and I'm not really sure what will happen after that. But just because they didn't finish well I still think that they're definitely quality horses. I just think there could be a Triple Crown winner this year, so he's always going to be tough out.
What about the other two horses with Louisiana ties, Gunrunner and Exaggerator? Your thoughts on their race and how they may do in the upcoming Triple Crown? Well,
it's kind of funny. I hope people have paid attention to my Twitter because being the horse racing nerd that I am, I kind of made a chart saying where I thought everyone would finish, and Gunrunner, Nyquist, and Exaggerator were 3 of my top horses. Not that it was that far out there. I mean, they were some of the favorites.
Did you put your money down?
I didn't bet the race correctly, let me put it that way, but I did have those horses in my bets. I think that they're all really talented. Exaggerator, I thought he was probably going to run down Nyquist if it had been just a little bit further, and he'll take him on in the Preakness, which is really exciting. Gunrunner's 50-50 right now, but he ran a great race. He just wasn't as good as Nyquist. Exaggerator ran into some traffic trouble, so you would say, well, maybe he'll get him in the Belmont, but he hasn't been able to beat him in 4 tries, so maybe it's an affirmed Aladar thing, and they'll get closer and closer every time. I don't know.
Mike, you covered a little bit of it. Your thoughts on the Bensons kind of jumping into this? They have jumped in full blast on this. It kind of took I'd say the airline drive compound by storm. Greg Bensel's been out front. Just your experience. You've been around the Saints for a long time. Talk about the excitement out there with, of course, both of those horses making the Kentucky Derby.
Well, it was funny how Sean Payton admittedly hopped on the bandwagon.
Yeah.
It was pretty funny talking about it. And I wasn't there the day. He said, my buddies would never believe I would own a seersucker suit.
Shoes too.
Yeah, he dove all the way in. But the coolest thing I think about that story was the way Tom Benson decided, with Greg Bensel's advice and everything, but there was a quote at some point, let's get the boys together. And that it's such a New Orleans story, that they've got 3 really top trainers in the entire business in Tom Amison, Dallas Stewart, and Al Stahl Jr. And they said, all right, let's get all 3 of them on this sort of dream team, and let's give them all an equal budget and free reign. It was basically taking advantage of the talent that we have here in New Orleans and making it a real New Orleans all-star outfit. I thought that was the coolest part of the whole story.
Was this, and either one of you guys can jump in on this, was this Mrs. Benson wanting to get involved in horse racing? Was it Greg Bensel that spearheaded this? Who got the organization kind of involved in this?
Well, the story goes that it kind of came about from a conversation in Tom Benson's office at the Greenbrier in 2014. He and Greg Bensel were talking, and he said, should we maybe get back in the business? Because Tom Benson was in the horse racing business in the 70s. He had a minor stakes horse in Sisima, but his son, who had done it with him, died, and he just didn't want to do it anymore. And I think some of that kind of came back because he and Gail would go to Saratoga and they would go to the fairgrounds, and I think he realized it could be a lot of fun to do that with her. So I don't think it was her idea, but I think that she was kind of an influence on him in doing that just because they had so much fun together.
Right. Now, Greg Bensel's kind of overseeing that part of the organization, right?
Right.
Is that more his deal? Of course, he's handling the PR for the Saints and the media relations for the Saints and Pelicans, but he's kind of taken a lot of his attention as well, right?
Right. He's kind of like their racing manager, I guess. maybe their racing GM.
That's a good way to call it, yes. And of course, he was wrapped up in the excitement as the entire organization was.
Yeah. No
really was.
Yeah, how many people they brought a lot of people down early in the week, but then they had a whole charter flight full to the max of another
like
30 or 40
something.
people that came on race day. So,
now, on race day, we heard with Sean Payton do the Riders Up opening. Was that something that was planned for a long time, or was it knowing that Benson and that contingent was going to be there in Payton? How did that work out? Do you have any idea?
Well, I've asked around about that, and I think it's really just who's in the paddock at the time, who's, I guess, has any sort of celebrity. And the funny thing is, I did not know that Sean Payton was doing that, because when you were in the paddock and I was down there, it is so crowded and there's so much going on that I didn't even see Sean Payton until I got back out on the track, and then someone said, "Did you hear that Sean Payton did that?"
Well, I knew I had heard the night
TV,
before that he was going to do it, but I didn't know the significance of it.
Right.
Greg had actually told me Sean's doing the Riders Up, and I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
whatever that means.
Right, but it is a
obviously a
huge
novice.
honor, isn't it?
I mean, it's definitely a big deal, but I'm not sure how far in advance it was planned, but you could see that he was having a ball doing it.
Well, a lot of fun in Louisville. You do it again?
Oh, of course I would do it again.
There you go. Let's talk a little Saints. When we get to the bottom of the hour, we'll open up the phone line so you guys can chime in and give your comments or questions for our panel tonight. I guess the first question is David Onyemata. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. He's unsigned. He was drafted by the CFL, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, 4th round, 35th pick overall. He was projected as the #1 player in Canada and in the CFL draft. Katherine, I'll take you first. Can he participate in minicamp without a contract? He doesn't have a contract right now.
Well, he doesn't. He can sign a waiver, and that's what Dante Fowler, the Jaguars pick last year, did, and then he got hurt the first day of rookie minicamp, and hopefully that doesn't happen in this situation, but they basically sign liability waivers so that they can participate. So I would think that he would be down here, contract or no contract. I don't think it's like a holdout situation as far as I know.
Right. Mike, do you anticipate the Rough Riders versus the Saints in terms of a contract dispute here? I mean, all rookies are slotted.
Right.
I mean, maybe he can ask for a little bit more upfront money, maybe that kind of deal. But for the most part, what he's getting is what he's getting, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's unusual that he hasn't signed, and maybe it's a matter of he hasn't come down to sign it yet. I mean, that might be because they wait till they arrive in town and sign him in person, I think, which is why they started doing it this week when they all arrived in town. But yeah, I mean, shoot, up until a couple of years ago, these guys didn't sign until into training camp sometimes, or certainly late July. It's only become recently that they started signing them this quickly. So I don't think that's anything to worry about other than probably just circumstance. And the CFL thing, he probably would have been the #1 pick if he was going to play in the CFL. Instead, they were probably just taking a 4th-round flyer, like the guy who's playing 2 sports or whatever, and they figure, well, he probably won't come here, but you never know. So.
Well, Katherine, you had a great point before we came on board. Your thoughts on why the Rough Riders may have chosen him.
Well, he definitely had a first-round grade. I've seen his Canadian scouting reports or CFL scouting reports, and they say, he was a sure first-rounder if he didn't go to the NFL. But I think that there's always a chance he doesn't make the Saints, even though they don't have many picks this year. So if that was the case, then they would have his rights, and they could kind of take him then. But I think he will, considering they don't have that many picks, but you never know. I mean,
it's kind of like people would understand the college baseball corollary here when a guy wants to go play for LSU, but so you don't draft him in round 1 because you get the feel he's going to go play in college, and so then you take him in round 10 just in case.
Right, just in case. Guys, what impact, if all, do you think that he can have this year? Canadian football is much different than the NFL. When you look at it, where they were a yard off the line of scrimmage, he comes to Canada via Nigeria. Never really played the game his whole life. He's more of a raw talent at this point. I mean, a tremendous strength, speed. I mean, everything you want in a defensive lineman, but he just doesn't have the experience with American football. What can we realistically expect?
Well, Mickey Loomis said on draft night that he thought he would contribute right away, or he would contribute this season. I don't know. I'm a little skeptical. I just think that's a very big leap to make for a guy that only has played 4 years of football ever. So I'm going to say he's probably not going to make much of an impact, at least not for the first half of the season, but that's just my opinion.
Yes.
Yeah, the nature of his position, though, they could probably give him a very specific
they could do that.
Set of plays, and package of plays.
Right.
He's in on this package, and he does this. We've seen a lot of undrafted defensive linemen get on the field for the Saints, Tyron Walker and Glenn Foster and guys like that. So there's that possibility. But yeah, to expect him to play more than 50% of snaps or anything as a rookie, I think is a long shot. I would say that's a long shot if he started for 4 years at Ohio State and was a 4th-round pick. The history just says that 4th-round picks aren't always, you don't count on them being starters right away.
I had a reporter on this week that said that he may play multiple positions. They may play him inside. They also might play him outside and allow his speed as a speed rusher. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think his size, in the base defense, he would maybe be a defensive end. And then in their nickel pass rushing packages, he might move inside and be sort of a pass rushing defensive tackle type. But their base, that's not even 25% of their team. The guy that I'm interested in, who I wrote about for tomorrow morning, is the exact opposite, Hauli Kikaha, who, since they did not draft a defensive end other than Onyemata, and they didn't sign one in free agency, I have a feeling he will be almost a full-time defensive end in their nickel package. He's only 245 pounds or whatever, but that's who I expect to see on that other edge, opposite of Cameron Jordan on passing downs.
Katherine, Sheldon Rankins was the first pick in the draft for the Saints, almost a no-brainer, 12th pick in the draft. A guy that had everything the Saints were looking for in a defensive lineman, kind of fell right to him this year, unlike previous drafts. Your thoughts on Rankins? Your thoughts on the Saints' pick of Rankins at 12?
Well, I think, like you said, it kind of was a no-brainer. He was the guy that basically all of us had settled on that the Saints would pick, simply because...
Which mock draft was that? Was that 7.0?
Okay, I only made 5, and he was my first pick in my first mock draft and my first pick in my last mock draft. So I get to claim credit.
The two that matter most.
But I just think that he was he seems to be exactly what they need, a guy that can play inside. I mean, people will say, well, they have Nick Farley. Well, I'm skeptical as to how far they can take Farley. I think he is what he is at this point, and he can kind of be a boom or bust guy. So he can also, they just need defensive line help.
Yeah.
They need an interior pass rusher, a guy who can kind of give a push up the middle, which they didn't have at all last year. And I think that if he can play early, that can certainly help their problems rushing the passer and in turn help their problems in the secondary. So I think it's exactly the pick they needed.
Yeah, as do I. Your thoughts, Mike?
I could see where there's probably not a lot of enthusiasm for an interior defensive tackle in New Orleans because we've never really seen one take the league by fire in New Orleans, not in a long time, obviously, since Leroy Glover and Joe Johnson.
Absolutely.
But look, what if he turns out to be Aaron Donald, who was picked right around the same time a couple years ago, or look in Tampa Bay. You know, I've been saying for years, boy, if they could just steal Gerald McCoy and Levante David from the Buccaneers, they'd be all set. And so if he can be that type of player, and the onus is also on the Saints to prove they know how to use that type of player. They had Cedric Ellis for years, similar style, 3 technique, who had the potential to play nose tackle. So maybe that's who we'll measure him against. And Cedric Ellis never made a Pro Bowl and never moved the needle, but he did help him win a Super Bowl. I don't know that Sheldon Rankins is a 10-sack type of guy, but what I think is he might push the pocket and create 2 extra sacks a year for Cameron Jordan. That 2013 season, they got great defensive tackle play, and Cam Jordan and Junior Gillette end up with 12 sacks each. I think that could be a big part of it. He's also a very good run defender.
Catherine, you mentioned the need for a defensive lineman. That was what was shocking to me when you look at the 2 second-round picks. Start off with Michael Thomas, who I think, honestly, and I've said on this show and the radio show, I think he's going to be a player that's going to be able to contribute immediately to this team. There was a need for a wide receiver. I just don't know if I'd have went with your second pick, your second-round pick to get him. Your thoughts on Thomas? Your thoughts on the Saints not going with a defensive lineman? Jaron Reed was there from Alabama. Would have been a nice set of defensive tackles to be able to plug up that middle, but they chose to go offense there. Your thoughts?
Well, you know how Peyton loves his offensive players. It's surprising, but it's not surprising. We all thought they would take a wide receiver at some point. I think a lot of us thought 4th round on, but a lot of people knew that they liked him early. So if that's the guy you want, then you go get him. I know that people say, well, their offense doesn't need help. I mean, it's ranked top 5, but I actually thought at times their offense was very inconsistent last year, especially at the beginning of the year. And I think that Drew Brees can make it work with these undrafted guys, but why keep asking him to? I think you need to get him as many playmakers as possible. And I think they have tried to do that this year, at least in the tight end part. They've tried to fix the tight end situation. So when they didn't go after a wide receiver in the spring, I thought it kind of became obvious they were going to target one in some way in the draft. And he's a guy that could take the Colston type role. He'd go over the middle. I mean, I think they say it's not an indictment on Brandon Coleman, but I definitely think it is. I think that by drafting Thomas, they kind of think Coleman is not going to live up to expectations.
Right. I agree 100% with that. I think that is a byproduct of them not having the confidence that they have in Coleman, although I am surprised they went up and got him at the 2nd-round pick. With that said, I think he's going to be a terrific player.
Yeah. Well, he probably will be, but the funny thing about the Saints is the fact that he got drafted in the 2nd round will not help his case at all. Like, he's going to have to prove it in the summer because they've bypassed those guys before. I mean, look, last year they spent the whole summer telling us about Brandon Coleman and Shontavious Jones, and they were going to become household names. And who has the best camp? Willie Snead, and Willie Snead plays. You know, Lance Moore got on the field that way. Marcus Colston got on the field that way. They dumped Dante Stallworth. Robert Meacham had to sit an entire year. So he doesn't automatically get to play because they drafted him in the 2nd round. But the potential is obviously great in this offense, and that is the exact style of receiver. If they would have drafted another, 5'10" speedster type, then I think you'd have questioned the pick. But Thomas absolutely made sense for this team.
They stayed with Ohio State. Von Bell was the second-round pick, trading their 3rd and 4th-round picks to be able to move up to get him. I've said it on both shows. The only problem with that is if a guy doesn't make it, you've compounded the problem by giving up multiple picks. But obviously they fell in love with this guy. Bell is a guy that can play the free safety position, but also can line up in the slot. They said in the draft that he was one of the better cover safeties out there. Your thoughts on Von Bell? Your thoughts on moving up to get Bell?
Well, for a team that says they need all their draft picks and they need to make them work, it definitely is puzzling when they trade up and
twice.
Right, and then they end up with only 5 picks. And they've had so much trouble drafting players over the last few years. It's kind of head-scratching, but I also at the same time understand how they work, and they're that team. They're going to be aggressive and go after players that they want. Now, the interesting thing is going up to get a safety. I think we talked about it being an indictment on Coleman. I think it's an indictment on Jairus Byrd, which I know they will never admit to the day that Byrd gets released, but it's definitely a thought in their minds, I think. And with Raphael Bush leaving, they wanted to keep Bush. Bush wanted to be a starter somewhere, and so that's why he left. And they didn't have that kind of safety net behind Byrd, who's gotten injured before. He's had back problems. He's had knee problems. And even when he was playing last year, he was just okay. And maybe that has to do with the defense being bad as a whole. I don't know. I'd give him another shot this year, but I think that's the thought process, that Byrd after this year might not be around if things don't improve.
Again, I agree with that. And Mike, they haven't really fooled with Byrd's contract, have they? I mean, it's not one of the contracts they wanted to do a lot of maneuvering on, which also tells you that, they didn't want to push that money a little bit further back.
That was one that seemed like it would be a natural.
It would have been a natural.
Exactly.
Your thoughts on Bell, and is this an indictment on maybe the future of Jairus Byrd if he doesn't play up to his potential this year?
It's hard to call it too much of an indictment on Byrd because it was their third pick of the draft and 61 overall. It's not like they went out and used the 12th pick on the draft on a safety who would maybe start it right away. And actually, they said they had the exact or very similar grade on Michael Thomas and Von Bell and chose Michael Thomas over Von Bell. So it wasn't like we've got to replace Jairus Byrd at all costs, but obviously the replacement is now in the building, and so it puts the onus on Byrd. But the good thing with Bell is, I think, if he's really good and Jairus Byrd is really good, there's a clear path to get these guys on the field at the same time. Von Bell was practically a cornerback at Ohio State. He plays, they call it field safety. He covered the number 2 receiver practically all year long. We saw Malcolm Jenkins come from Ohio State and play both positions. So you're going to have 5 defensive backs on the field at all times. They almost drafted a corner in round 1. And they don't draft a corner, they draft a safety instead. But it's very possible that we saw it in 2013, 3 safeties on the field with 2 corners if Bell lives up to expectations right away.
Ohio State is on the quarter system. Do you guys know if these guys will participate in minicamp? If they do, then they have to wait until their class graduates, until the school is up at Ohio State before they can participate in the off-season workouts.
I'm not positive, but I would assume minicamp's usually not a problem, and also it's on the weekend, so I think that they could always fly in and fly out. But correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but
they usually miss 2 or 3 weeks of OTAs, hey, it was a huge problem for Andrews Pete last year. They talked about it deep into the summer, but he was a conditioning issue. I don't
he was out of shape.
think it's the same issue with these guys happened to Brandon Cooks, and nobody said that was an issue for him. So it's each different player. But we've got technology now, so they'll be Skyping every night with them with their playbook and the tape review of the games. That's what they do with these guys when they're on the
guys. First 3 picks, impact picks for this team. I mean, are these 3 guys that can come in, play right away, make an impact in some form or fashion, whether it's the nickel or dime for Bell, whether you're looking at Rankins hopefully being an every down player for them, and Thomas as well.
I would say I think that the first 2 picks will get on the field early. For me, jury's still out on the third one. It just depends on how they use Bell and if they want to put him on the field no matter what, and maybe put him on the field in their nickel packages. But I certainly think that Rankins and Thomas will both have an impact early.
Mike?
I never overstate a rookie class. Look at last year for a good example. Last year was a successful rookie class, and Andrews Pete didn't play that much. Stephon Anthony played every down. Kikaha got off to a fast start and kind of faded a little, and that's a good top 3. So that should probably be the high end of the expectation level. I would not expect boom, 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 we've got 3 new starters and here we go. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to pan out and be good picks. And look, we talked about trading up. I was surprised they did that too, because I thought they actually wanted to stockpile more picks this year. But if those 3 are hits, then that alone makes it a successful draft class to have. If 3 guys that I know many rankings were like this, but ESPN had all 3 of those guys in their Scouts Inc. Rankings in the top 37. They end up with. So if you end up with 3 of the top 37 players in a draft class, that's potential for a really nice class.
And you mentioned trading up again for Onyemata, 2 fifth-round picks. For him, this year, one next year, giving up another pick. So, I mean, again, compounding the problem if he ultimately is a project player and doesn't make it. Daniel Lusko is an interesting player because the year before, when he wasn't injured, over 1,000 yards, double digits on touchdowns, can catch the ball at the backfield. I mean, he's got some talent.
The offensive MVP for Cal,
There
ahead
you go.
of Jared Goff,
Exactly.
the number one pick in the
That's
draft.
right. I believe you wrote that, if I'm not mistaken. So, guys, well, take it first. Your thoughts on Lasco? Crowded backfield,
Yeah.
but can he make the team?
You know where he might make the team is special teams gunner or coverage, which is actually a specialty he is in college. You throw the position out the window in the 7th round. You might as well lump him in with the other 19 undrafted free agents they signed. You don't read that undrafted free agent list and say, wait, they didn't need a blank. You know, they're filling it out. But this just tells you how high their grade was on Lasco, that they wanted to secure him and didn't want to lose him to another team. So, yeah, great chance to make the roster, but we'll see him play special teams, just like we saw. 7th round pick was a running back last year, Marcus Murphy. I think he had 1 carry all season.
Right.
I don't think Lasco figures into the running back plan.
Katherine?
I agree with Mike. I think it's the toss-up at that point, at the 7th round, and we won't know until we get to training camp. I think with Marcus Murphy, he was on the bubble for a long time to make the team, if I remember correctly.
Well, we thought he was, but until
we
Peyton
thought he
started
was.
gushing over him, and we realized how much they liked him, but especially as a return man.
Oh, that's right. Didn't he say the wrong name?
Maybe.
I think
I don't
Peyton
know.
was talking about another player, but he really meant Murphy.
Right. No, you're right. That did
I
happen.
can't remember who it was,
Right.
but now you look at Murphy and you're like, well, now he's on the
bubble a little bit.
and it's
Although
not-
Murphy will have one path to make the team, and that's be the best return man. It
Right.
might be a Murphy versus Cadet thing,
Yeah.
or a Spiller Murphy Cadet, 3
Right.
guys going for 2 spots thing.
Interesting. Where they look like they really struck gold, and again, it's conjecture at this point, is undrafted free agency. A lot of the pundits out there have rated them as one of the top teams in terms of undrafted free agency. A lot of that, as the fans know, as a lot of us that talk about this on a daily basis know, it has to do with them allowing undrafted free agents to have an equal footing with anyone on the field, whether it's a veteran or a draftee. Especially, it was kind of, I don't know, weird that with so many needs at the defensive line position, at the guard position, they didn't go in that direction, but they sure loaded up on offensive linemen when you talk about the undrafted free agency. Riker Matthews, Avery Young, Joseph Cheek, Landon Turner, Jack Allen, Marcus Henry. Guys, I'm not going to ask you, man, who's the guy, but is there anyone out there that really sticks out to you guys that thinks that, you know what, that name, hey, they got a real shot?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's 2 right away. Now, I mean, they're undrafted, so
Right.
that tells you how they were graded by 32 teams in the NFL. But 2 of those guys were 2 of the 3 first-team All-American interior linemen. That's stunning to me.
It is.
It was. I mean, when I saw that Landon Turner, he's
Right.
the right guard for North Carolina. He was first-team All-American last year. And then Jack Allen, the
Yes.
center from Michigan State, first-team All-American last year. And both these guys go undrafted. But what it also tells you is the agents for these guys chose the Saints.
Yes.
For 2 reasons: their history and their opportunity. The Saints have used. I had a stat from Stats and Info, ESPN Stats and Info. I think it was 56, but I can't remember the exact number. But it was the second most undrafted free agents that have played at least a game for the Saints since 2006, behind only the Cleveland Browns. And so they use undrafted guys. Their current starter at left guard, Tim Lolito, was an undrafted guy. So these guys feel like they have an opportunity. So I think they got their pick of the litter. And maybe they knew that. Maybe that's why they grab a Daniel Lasco. They're like, this guy will never sign with us. But these guards, they're gonna come flying to us.
I think they got a legitimate shot, especially with again, the not going out and getting a veteran guard to bring in. Anyone stick out to you of those names?
mean, like you said, Turner, I think some people had him projected to go in the 4th round.
They did.
Which makes me just wonder why he went undrafted. You always wonder that. What is the one thing that made this guy drop? But I think that, just like you said, they have an opportunity, just like Tim Lolito had at one point. But the way they've gone about the guard situation this whole offseason has been a little puzzling. Calamete was going to be tendered at the lowest amount, and then they worked out a deal right before the date. Lolito was tendered, so they could have lost him, but he didn't want to be a backup in Dallas. He got an offer from them. So they could have lost one of their guards already, and then they didn't sign one, they didn't draft one. So it makes you kind of wonder where their thoughts are. So I think that I'm not going to say any of these undrafted guys can surpass either one of them, but I think that they definitely think they've got a shot. Based on what Mike said, I think their agents think they have a shot.
Oh, yeah, for
so
sure.
Well,
it's going to be interesting.
what's interesting is Sean Payton kind of revealed his hand after the draft. Like, he came in right after pick number 32 on the first night, and just sort of a stream of consciousness answer. He was like, somebody said, what did you think about how the first round went? And he goes, oh, there were a couple of guards that went late that that we liked. He said something to that effect, and I think they
Joshua
went something
Garnett from
like
Stanford.
yeah, and then Ifedi that went to Seattle who can play guard. So I think it's very possible that, knowing the Saints, they probably would have traded up on Saturday or on Friday to get one of those guys, or if they had fallen to 47, it's very possible they could have drafted a guard. Those guys were clearly on their radar, but they didn't force it, and they didn't feel like they needed to force it. And I think once you get past round 2, round 3, all of a sudden you're not drafting a guy who's automatically better than Tim Lolito and Senio Calamete, who shouldn't be shortchanged here. Obviously, they're no Jari Evans and Carl Nix, but they're probably as good as anyone that would be drafted in, say, the 3rd round. So they're not first-round caliber guys, but they're still the front runners. The other name to watch is Anders Peet, because I think that's been sort of plan B all along, which is, we've got Zach Strief at right tackle. Let's Peet can play guard. He played it a little last year. It's not his best position. He struggled a little bit at it. But they've got an off season to teach him, and always the after June 1st veteran signing that could come in too. So there's still other avenues if Lolito and Calamete aren't working out, but they sure get the jump start on it. When they line up for OTAs, those will probably be the 2 starting guards.
What about Peet at guard? Your thoughts?
I think what holds Peet back is not talent. I think it's a confidence issue, and I think it has been ever since training camp. I think people picked up on that right away. He's not the most confident guy in the world, and when you're in the NFL, you need to be that way, sort of. If you've ever seen an interview with Joshua Garnett, the Stanford guy we were talking about that won the first round, he was saying things like, I'm going to maul these guys, and you can just tell, maybe that's why Peyton liked him. He just exudes that confidence, and I think that that's something Peet has to work on before he's going to be able to be a full-time starter. So it'll be interesting to see how he grows in his 2nd year, and a lot of guys, they come in after a year and they've shown vast improvement, and who's to say that he can't? I mean, they drafted him in the 1st round after all, but I think that he could struggle a little bit still.
Well, the hope is that all of these rookies from last year take that next step, right? I mean, they really need those players to take the next step, even guys that didn't play, like P.J. Williams and Davis Tull.
Yeah, and Damian Swan in that mix at cornerback, because corner is another position that they tried to get Josh Norman very aggressively in free agency. They talked about how they might have drafted, I'm drawing a blank, the Buccaneers, Vernon Hargreaves. And but they didn't get one, so now the opportunity is there for both P.J. Williams and Damian Swan there at corner to step up, and there's some talent there. Obviously behind Delvin Breaux, and boy, if Keenan Lewis is healthy, what a difference that would make at corner. But so those corners in year 2, I mean, Davis Toll, I'm not expecting too much as a 5th-round pass rusher who basically redshirted all of last season. But you're right, the big 3, Peet, Haole Kakaha, who I mentioned earlier, and then Stephon Anthony, who's also moving positions over to the strong side linebacker. He had obviously a very good year in what we could see, tackles and athleticism. But it sounds like the Saints identified right away that they wanted a true quarterback of the defense type. They went out and signed James Laurinaitis. I think they identified that more than any defensive need as what could help fix their defense. And they're eager to move Anthony over to the strong side linebacker position. And Joe Vitt said before the draft that he's the first true 4-3 Sam that they've had since Scott Fujita. Won't necessarily be a pass rusher from that position, but will play the role that Fujita used to play for this team. So they're excited about that move. It's a lot of moving parts, but it should actually probably be easier for Anthony to just go out and play and use his size and athleticism.
No, look, not having to get guys in the right position, having to think and get into a position where you can react. I think this is the best thing that can happen to Anthony early in his career. Not to say that he won't play middle linebacker down the line, but right now I think this is the best position for him.
Well, what they asked him to do last year was a lot for a young rookie. I mean, usually these middle linebackers, they're veterans that have been doing it forever. And before him, that was Curtis Lofton, who had been in the league for a while. Vilma, it's hard. It's a lot to ask. And I think, like you said, moving him to this position where he doesn't have to think as much and he's got a veteran guy teaching him and telling him what to do can do nothing but help, in my opinion.
You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports each and every Thursday night with our live broadcast right here on WLAE-TV at 6 p.m. Also, 10 o'clock on WLAE on Friday nights, and also Pelican Sports Television at 9 o'clock every Friday night. Mike Triplett of ESPN, Katherine Terrell of NOLA.com are our guest. We'll go to the phone lines when we get back. Also, we'll have some more questions about the Saints. Your questions coming up. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile.
Know what?
What?
Since I got adopted, I've learned a lot about these humans.
I know. I mean, check out these two. It's Flirt City over here.
Yeah, I noticed that. It looks like my human is definitely into your human.
Oh, look! I think she's getting his number.
Nice.
Your human's got some sweet moves.
Takes after his dog. Oh, look, they're doing that thing where they put their arms around each other.
She kicked up a leg. It's like in the movies.
That's awesome. Looks like we're going to be hanging out a little bit more.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. 866-3200 is the phone number if you'd like to get involved in tonight's show. Katherine, Terrell of NOLA.com and Mike Triplett of ESPN are on our panel tonight. Let's talk a little bit more about undrafted free agents before we go to the phone lines. I'll throw the wide receivers out to you guys. Give me a yay or a nay when you think if these guys have a chance to make it. Jared Dangerfield out of Western Kentucky, Jordan Williams out of Ball State, Tommy Lee Lewis out of Northern Illinois. Anybody stick out to you guys?
Ball State receivers.
Uh-oh, there you go.
Willie Snead's old teammate.
Yes.
He's probably rooting for him.
And they also get the, Mike New didn't coach him, but Mike New's now the head coach at Ball State, so he probably had really good intel. So you like the background they got on that guy. I'll go with him out of the receivers group for that reason.
Anybody stick out?
I don't have a pick yet. Let me wait till OTAs.
So you can see the guys actually run.
It is interesting, though. I don't know if you have height and weights listed, but Jared Dangerfield's a big guy, like we were talking about. Michael Thomas. Tommy Lee, what's his last name again?
Tommy Lewis.
Yeah, he's very small. He's like one of those dynamic return specialists, all-purpose guys. Little Darren Sproles look-alike maybe.
The secondary is interesting, as interesting as the offensive linemen and the undrafted free agency. Names that people really would recognize: Trey Elson from Ole Miss, Mike Caputo of Wisconsin, Devontae Harris of Texas A&M, and Ken Crawley of Colorado. I had Chris Landry, former NFL scout, on my program this week, and he raved about Ken Crawley and Devontae Harris. Guys, any of these names stick out? I mean, they're all these are. If you watch today college football, these are names that stick out to you.
I remember the night they were signing undrafted guys, and that's always really crazy. But once it came out that Harris had been signed, people went crazy, just saying what a great pickup that was. So I think that's going to be a very interesting pick to see what he can do.
Trey Elston, I know, was the highest-rated player, at least in that Scouts Inc. ranking. That by far the highest-rated player they signed. He was in the 170s, 180s overall. I don't know what round that equates to, 5th or 6th round grade on him, and obviously had a lot of success in college. So.
Linebackers: Dominique Lavelle of UL Lafayette, Dylan Lee is a household name out of Alabama, Jeff Schottmeyer out of North Carolina. Any of those guys kind of stick out?
With the linebackers, not so much for me. I don't know. How you like.
Dylan Lee and DJ Petway, who you're probably going to list soon as defense end. You got two players from Alabama's defense.
Right.
I did notice while watching some college football last year that Alabama can play defense.
Yeah, a little bit.
They were pretty good at it.
They weren't bad.
That.
Especially if you're an LSU fan. They weren't
certainly beat
bad.
LSU.
The good news for LSU fans and Leonard Fournette is that I think 22 players from Alabama's defense got drafted or signed by
the bad news is
sure
they reload.
seems like
that's not going to matter.
they had like 8 defensive tackles drafted. I think. How could they have all played?
I know. There's no doubt. And believe me, there was one that was sitting on the board in the second round that I was hoping the Saints would go after. You mentioned DJ Petway, Mitchell Lowen, a big kid out of Arkansas. 2 big defensive linemen that may be able to come in and contribute. And it's not like they don't lead defensive linemen on this team.
Right. I mean, last year, how many undrafted guys made it on the defensive line? I think it was 4. Mabry, Bobby Richardson, Caleb Ewells, and
Tavares
Barnes. And Ewells didn't play much. Barnes, surprisingly, they let go. I was shocked to see that, and he got picked up right away. But I guess maybe they're going to look again at that undrafted pool.
It
which
is,
has been
yeah,
successful.
Bobby Richardson started for him, and I mentioned Glenn Foster and Tyrone Walker earlier. I should probably add this up, but I bet you they've used more, I mean, running backs, undrafted free agent success, but defensive line's probably right behind running back.
Yep, no doubt. Let's head to the phone lines. Greg is in Houma. Greg, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Greg.
Hey guys, I got a question about the the strategy of not signing Drew Brees and letting him hit that $30 million cap. What is the Saints doing? Is it a big gamble because he's an unrestricted free agent? Do they hope he's going to play lights out or what? I mean, this seems to be a huge gamble, especially if a team offers Drew Brees, ungodly amount of money after the season ends. And I'll hang up and listen.
Thank you, Greg. Katherine, why don't you take it first this week? I believe it was on the Rich Eisen show. Brees' agent, Tom Condon, talked about the fact that the Saints seem pretty content with letting him play under the $30 million cap this year.
Well, that just tells me that Brees and Condon have a number in mind, and they're not going to move from it, and the Saints just don't want to pay him that much. You could tell that something changed because at the beginning of the offseason, they were talking about how easy it would be to sign him, and they weren't worried about it. And I truly think they believed that. The people I talked to said it was a matter of time. Then suddenly, all the news dried up, and I think it was about that point they realized that there was not a deal was not coming anytime soon. So it's definitely, I guess, not surprising, but also I would be surprised if they let Drew Brees become a free agent. I mean, I don't know about
well,
you.
the quarterback market,
I
I think what changed is the quarterback market didn't help. Joe Flacco, who was in the exact same situation, signed, which shocked me that he went past Aaron Rodgers, he went past everybody, over $22 million a year. And there's no way Drew Brees is going to sign for less than Joe Flacco. He's still better than Joe Flacco and will be for the next 3 years probably. Brock Osweiler, $18 million a year. Sam Bradford, who is also a Tom Condon client, $18 million a year. And Tom Condon said this on the radio too. He's like, boy, the salary cap has gone way up in recent years, which is why the Saints can carry that $30 million. And what are people spending on now that the salary cap has gone way up? They're spending on quarterbacks like never before. So Drew Brees, I don't know if the Saints thought, they'll get him for $21 million a year or something like that early, and now he's asking for 23 or 24. They're going to meet at the middle at some point, I would think. Their one gamble might be, look, he won't cost more. This might be what they're thinking. He won't cost more next year than he's going to cost this year by a lot. And why would he want to start over with a new team at age 38? Maybe they'll think he'll blink and not want to risk getting injured this season or something like that. But Brees has nailed this, and it's obvious. Deadlines are what matter in these things, and there's no actual deadline. The actual deadline would be next year. So I still think it gets done this offseason, but there's no reason it has to.
Well, unless he doesn't want to go into the season without a contract.
Right.
I mean, Brees could be thinking on his head, and they could be both playing chicken.
They might hope,
to see who.
I do think that Greg mentioned the $30 million cap number, though. That's we thought they were going to have to do something because it would be the easiest way, but they did it other ways. The fact that Brees has a $30 million cap figure, try to get that out of your head. He's making $20 million, which is actually the 10th highest paid quarterback in the league this year. I think it's 9th or 10th. Highest paid quarterback in the league. The only reason his cap number is $30 million is because the Saints kept borrowing from it in years past. And you criticize the Saints for doing it, but the fact that the cap has gone up and up and up and up, he counted $12 million against the cap when it was $124 million, and now he's counting $30 million against the cap when it's $156 million. So that's why they did it that way. But his actual salary is basically average for NFL quarterbacks right now.
Right, the $20 million plus the amortization of the signing
and that's
bonus,
not
which
going
is $10
anywhere.
million.
If they were to cut him today,
It's still
that
got
$10
the
million
$10
is on your books no matter what. Yeah.
Is it structure? Is it length? Do you think that may be the hiccup here? I mean, the Saints would obviously not want to be able to be in a position where you get to the end of the contract and maybe he's a diminishing player, where you're paying him too much, where it's too much to get out of the contract. Brees probably wants as much money as he can get up front, which means you got to amortize that signing bonus over the life of the deal. And you don't want a balloon payment at the end. So there's got to be a happy medium for
both. If anything, the Saints would be pushing for length.
Right.
They want to have him under control for a long time.
Sure.
Brees would probably be happy to sign a 2-year, $50 million deal or something, which some team might pay him next year. I think Greg nailed it when he's like, you are gambling a little bit because teams are so quarterback crazy right now. You telling me that the Rams just traded up to number 1, but there is not some team that thinks they're in contention that'll say, let's give Drew Brees $25 million a year and let's go try to win.
Right. Oh, I agree with that.
And the Browns always need a new quarterback, so they might need one next year.
The Saints probably don't feel like now the Texans. If Brock Osweiler doesn't work out, maybe Drew Brees will be like, you know what, I can go win one with this team.
Right.
The Browns, I don't think are going to steal
The Broncos
this.
maybe head that way as well.
The Broncos,
right?
They can't franchise him, so that's the problem.
Can they franchise him the third time?
Absurd amount of money. They can, but it'd be an
$40 million
absurd amount of
hit,
money.
though, isn't it?
It's
$40 million.
If I were Drew Brees and they threaten the franchise tag or place the tag on me at $43 million, I would absolutely run to sign that.
Right.
I mean, who would want a 1-year salary of $43 million?
So what do you think the holdup is? I mean,
I think Brees just has a number in mind. I think he, like Mike said, he wants to be paid more than Joe Flacco, which is a reasonable thing to want. And I'm going to guess they probably want him at maybe 21, and he probably wants at least 22.5 or 23, and maybe they think he's 37. We don't want to pay him that much. I mean, it's always about money, and Brees is not going to budge. And
it'll
right
probably
now,
end up
it looks
around
like
23.
They
I mean,
won't,
we
but
all.
they probably will.
You know, I remember writing this 5 years ago. It's like if it's because there's no deadline. If Brees would have said, "I'll take $19 million a year," they could have got it done. If the Saints would have said, "We'll do the $20 million a year," they could have gotten it done. But there was no reason for either side to blink for months because they didn't have to, and so they're content to just play that game where neither one calls the other one for because they don't want to sound like the one that wants to get it done.
Why the backlash against Brees in the market? I mean, you see it now more than ever. I get the phone calls all the time on the radio show. You know, Drew Brees is making too much money. He needs to give money back. But when you look at the scale of what quarterbacks are making, he's not breaking the bank here. And then, again, I've said before, the problem with the Saints is not Drew Brees' salary. It's the misses in free agency. It's the misses with the draft. I mean, but we again.
He's the one player who has earned his contract and more. $20 million a year has been a bargain for the last 5 years. Everybody was shocked when he makes $100 million. That was $100 million well spent when you look at what he's now. It hasn't amounted to a lot of wins, obviously. But you're right. When he's costing $20 million a year and the cap is $156, that means you have $136 million a year for the rest of the team. And Jarvis Bird didn't pan out, and Brandon Browner didn't pan out, and C.J. Spiller didn't pan out, and the list and the draft picks didn't pan out, and the Junior Gillette signing didn't pan out. The Cam Jordan deal looks good, but they've missed on all the other picks. Brees has not been the reason. Now look, you just got it. Like I said, $20 million is what a quarterback costs. Get it out of your mind. You know, Cam Newton costs 22. Matt Ryan makes more money than Brees. Joe Flacco makes more money than Brees. And even Tom Brady finally signed a new deal that was higher than Brees's. He's been the one that's ruined it for everybody, I think. Tom Brady has been taking this hometown discount in New England. Everybody wants Brees to do the same, but he has lived up to his contract.
Katherine, what can you add?
I think it's a couple of things, and I think a lot of it started before 2014. This all actually started in 2012 because I don't think people like it when players' contract negotiations go to that level. They see it as a player being selfish. But in 2014, it was not Brees' best year. He had a couple of moments where he lost the games for them. The Lions game always comes to mind. And I think people saw that as he's declining, he's using up too much money, and he's the reason the Saints can't sign better players. Well, add to that when they traded Jimmy Graham, and at the time, people saw that as, well, they need to open up money, and that's Brees' fault. So people have just kind of gotten it in their heads that this is Brees' fault. What my opinion is the team gave him that contract, and the team has made a lot of other mistakes. I mean, Junior Gillette was a huge one that they're still paying for.
Yes.
Not having a single draft pick in 2014 outside of Cooks pan out. In 2012 was bad too. So I think that the team has made a lot of mistakes, and Brees has such a spotlight. It's easy just to say, well, this is.
Well, he's
this
the
is
guy
his
that makes
fault.
$20 million.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. When you make more than anyone on the team, you're going to get.
And then
backlash.
meanwhile, probably some of the same fans, I don't know if it's different fans or whatever, are like so excited that Terrell Armstead becomes like the second highest left, because it's like now everybody knows how good our left tackle is. They don't care that he's making $13 million a year, but you know, those are the pains that come with being a $20 million a year player, which we'll never have to know about.
That is a great segue, because I'll ask you about the Terrell Armstead extension. $64.5 million over 5 years. $38 million injury guarantee, $25 million fully guaranteed contract. I think an $11 million signing bonus off the top of my head. Mike, your thoughts?
Well, they didn't win the negotiation with Terrell Armstead. They paid him as if he has already made the Pro Bowls that everybody expects him to make. It's the second richest contract for an offensive tackle in the league today. So, look, Sean, they weren't trying to play hardball with him. Sean Payton let the cat out the bag last year when he said he wouldn't trade him for any left tackle in the league. I think the fact that he played hurt, and you like to see this, he played hurt with a knee injury last year, and I think just proved his worth even more, even though it didn't lead to a Pro Bowl season, and he probably didn't look his best on film, but it was so appreciated in-house that he got the deal he deserved. I think a strong argument could be made that he's the second best player on the team. It's either him or Cam Jordan, and he's very, very, very important to the future of the team because he will be playing left tackle, you would hope, when Drew Brees isn't the quarterback anymore.
Right. Catherine, what can you
I agree completely, and I was just surprised they got it done so quickly. But the Saints have been doing that lately with some players. We were surprised when Junior Galette got signed so quickly. We thought it was going to be a knockdown, drag-out fight, and it wasn't.
His deal came at a little bit of a discount, though.
Right, and I think
Galette's
that's why
deal,
they
and I
did
think
it.
that's why it got done. And Jordan's had to wait another year because it didn't come with a discount. But yeah, you're right, Armstead. They didn't have to do this right now, but it's good to see.
But it's good to get it out of the way because you don't want to go into next season and maybe in a predicament
him
where
being
you've got to look at, okay,
Right.
we didn't sign Breeze, I got to use this franchise tag, and or again maybe looking at other players there. It was something that you really needed to do.
It may have been part of it. They may have realized once the Breeze negotiations kind of stalled, well, we can't go into the offseason trying to deal with both of these at once. So we've got to choose one, and we've got to,
maybe
choose
they
the
want to
easier
use
one.
that franchise tag on Breeze after all. 1 year,
That
40
would make for an interesting
That really,
offseason.
you're not kidding, huh?
By the way, next year, this cap jail, this cap hell, whatever you want to call it,
they're out of
pretty
it.
much over
Yeah,
next
it's
year.
over.
Now, once Breeze's deal comes
For
and
now.
Unger's deal comes and they sign a couple other guys and they fill out their 53-man roster, they'll be up against it again.
You say that, but then this season, if they don't sign Breeze, they're not going to have much cap room. So they're going to have to open up cap room to sign new players, right? So they might have to
this season they
restructure
might push
contracts.
more on board.
But it won't be like it was the last few years.
Right.
You're right about that.
You mentioned Unger. Talk about Unger because again, he's coming up next year with his deal as well. The centerpiece of the Graham trade. He has come in. He has played magnificently for this team. He's getting a little bit up in age, so I mean, there's an age factor there. But your thoughts about re-signing him?
He's only 29, right?
Yeah, I think he'll be 30 before the season
30.
starts.
I think on the Saints side, it's a no-brainer. For Unger, it just depends on, I guess, how much he liked playing in New Orleans, because he didn't get a choice in that.
Yeah, that's true. And his whole life was Hawaii, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington.
Watch him be another player that goes back to Seattle.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But he's played great, and I think they would be wise to re-sign him, 30 or no 30.
I hear Seattle's got a plan for Brandon Browner, but you know what? We had a plan.
Hey,
too.
look, I'll tell you what. Brandon Browner did not play well and was a disaster in New Orleans, and then starts getting booed by the fans. They did not use Brandon Browner
I agree with
correctly
that.
last year.
I
I
agree.
blame the Saints coaching staff as much as anybody for that.
Let's talk about some of these free agents that they brought in. This is the first time I've had you guys since then. We touched a little bit on James Laurinaitis. Your thoughts on Laurinaitis, what he brings to the table with this team, and how big of a signing that is for the Saints, considering, again, the ability to now move Anthony to the outside linebacker position?
I think it's a great signing if he plays like he did before he got hurt last year. Last year, it's kind of a toss-up, I guess, as to whether the injury really affected his play or whether he's just getting older. So if you're getting the older version that's declining, then the signing is going to go the way of some of these other aging veterans the Saints signed. It didn't work out. But I really do think that it was a very bad injury, and that probably compromised him a lot. I think he had to wear a cast or something that he kind of...
That sleeve that went all
Right.
all the way
He
up.
said he
So-
wasn't just trying to look like J.J.
Right.
Watt.
He couldn't move his arm, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you
Right,
could see him
and
on
that's-
some
that's
He
tackles.
said if he was a
affect you.
Major League pitcher, you would have had to have Tommy John.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, and it's not like, I mean, I'm sure the Saints looked at that and thought, well, once he's healthy, I think that he'll be fine. But I think what you're getting is veteran leadership, and they really needed that last year. It was better than it had been, but I still think that they kind of had a void there. So I think he'll help a lot in that situation.
Can you add anything to what you said earlier
Well,
about Laurinaitis?
I don't know that he's going to blow anyone off the page. That's not even an expression, but he won't do that either. But and I'm drawing a blank now. While she was talking, I was trying to think. They visited with another guy that was very similar to Laurinaitis. And then I heard they were kicking the tires on Derek Johnson as well. I think their number one goal heading into free agency, even though none of us projected it, their number one goal seemed to be veteran middle linebacker, signal caller, quarterback of the defense. So I think that just tells you that when they reviewed what went wrong last season, and we're blaming Brandon Brown, or Sean Payton made a point once, he said there were some times where the linebackers blew their assignment and it made it look like Brandon Brown was starting. I think they were out of position and adjusting incorrectly last year a lot more than we realized. And their linebacker pass coverage was worse than their secondary pass coverage last year.
Craig Robinson comes in. He's kind of an underrated guy coming in. I mean, I watched some Cleveland Brown games where the guy kind of stuck out. Thoughts?
Right, he wasn't someone I knew much about coming in. I mean, you might know more.
I mean, I researched him after they signed him, and I had never really heard of him, but he was either undrafted or a late round pick, and he had carved out a starting quarterback of the defense, middle linebacker role for them too. So they go sign two guys like that. He could play weak side or he could play middle linebacker. I don't think he'll have a starting position on this team, but I think he can fill in at both spots, play some special teams. So that helps with the depth. They did that again with the guy from Atlanta, Nate Stuper. None of those guys.
He can play special teams.
Yeah, none of those guys, got everyone really excited in the first couple weeks of free agency, but they've definitely filled out their depth there.
And you mentioned Stuper again. He is more of a special teams guy, but did have some flashes when he got to play with the defense with Atlanta last year.
Right, he did come on towards the end of the season as he got more chances. I feel like his playing time is kind of sporadic all season, but that's kind of the life of a backup. And I don't think that he's going to be some guy that comes in and necessarily starts, but he'll be a quality backup. And the Saints needed that. The linebacker position was horrific in terms of depth last year, and they were signing guys off the street and playing them the next week, and that happened more than once. Dunbar, they signed, I can't even remember now, they signed two other guys.
They're bringing them off the street, man.
Right.
I mean,
James Anderson started a couple games.
I mean, once that's happening, you realize you've got a problem and you need to have depth. So that was definitely good for them to do that.
The Nick Fairley signing, as big as the Laurinaitis signing is, I think that the Fairley signing is just as big because he's never tapped his potential. And if somehow he can tap that potential, it could be an incredible signing for this team. Your thoughts on Fairley?
I like the contract. If they had signed him to a 5-year, $25 million deal, I'd be like, he hadn't earned it yet. You got him on a 1-year, $3 million deal, and that's great. He has to prove it, and there's basically no risk attached to that. So I think that's great for the Saints. I think the same things we were saying about Sheldon Rankins, he could bring that as a disruptor up the middle, and he very quietly had a great year in St. Louis. Some of the analytical sites like Pro Football Focus loved him and just said even though he didn't show up in sacks that he had a great year in a very part-time role, and he might play a part-time role here. But they want to get a lot of guys that can rush a passer from all positions on the field in their nickel defense. They didn't get the edge. I wish they would have found an edge rusher somewhere in the draft or free agency. But what they've revamped that defensive tackle position for sure.
You mentioned fairly early. If you would just kind of reiterate or just elaborate a little bit more on your thoughts.
I just think he's the type of guy who he can be. I said this earlier. He can be a boom or bust pick just because you don't always know where his head is at. He's a guy that needs motivation to play, and maybe he has it with this 1-year deal. But he had a lot of issues throughout his NFL career, and one of them stems around his weight. He's coming overweight. He's coming underweight. Last year he was underweight when he showed up to training camp, I think. So that's one of those things they're going to have to work on and balance. But he can be a very good, productive player if he wants to be. They just got to figure out how to make him into that very quickly.
Guys, we only got about 30 seconds left. You like the Kobe Fleener signing?
The exact opposite of my Nick Fairley answer. Like the signing, hate the contract.
Right.
I can't believe he cost $7.2 million a year. I can't believe he didn't cost $4 million a year, $5 million a year tops. But he's going to thrive in New Orleans.
Right.
Right, that was a lot of money, and if you're going to pay that much money, why not just keep Ben Watson, who I think was around the same price, or maybe even cheaper.
I think he could be better than Fleener. Fleener was Watson was a ton cheaper, less than $4 million a year.
Much younger, though.
Yes,
so Fleener can be an upgrade, but I mean, he got more than some guys who I think are going to the Pro Bowl on defense. So I was very surprised at that part.
Right. Well, they'll use him, and I think he'll be productive. I just think it's going to cost a lot of money.
No doubt about it. Katherine, Terrell, Mike Triplett, thanks so much for being with us tonight on Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night here on WLAE-TV at 10 p.m. and also statewide on Pelican Sports Television, 9 p.m. every Friday night. You catch me on the radio, 9:90 a.m. WGSO, weekdays 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. You can check us out on the TuneIn Radio app, which is a free download for your smartphone or tablet. Also on ericasher.com, where you can listen live, download the podcast, Every single episode of Inside New Orleans Sports can also be found at ericasher.com as well. Again, special thanks to our guests, Katherine, Terrell, and Mike Triplett. Also to the WLAE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Donovan Joseph, Kenny Juneau, Philip Williamson, Naila Jones, and my director, William Hill. New Orleans, thanks so much for watching. We'll check you right back here next Thursday night for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.